The manor had always been cold, but that night, the chill felt personal, like something ancient had turned its gaze inward. She thought she had 3 more days. 3 days to find the words, to build the courage, to decide if the truth would destroy her or set her free. But fate, as it always does in the presence of the immortal, moved faster than human hope. The reflection on the screen betrayed her first. Then his shadow fell across the room, and she knew nothing would ever be hidden again. The laptop hummed softly in the dim library, its pale glow the only light against the towering walls of leather-bound books and forgotten centuries. Outside, the rain had just begun, a slow, deliberate rhythm against the stained glass windows, each drop a countdown she didn't know had started. Elena sat with her back to the door, fingers hovering over the keyboard, eyes scanning the confirmation email for the 3rd time that hour. Prenatal visit number 2, Tuesday, 10 a.m., Dr. Castellan's office. The words felt surreal, like they belonged to someone else's life. Someone braver. Someone who wasn't living in a Gothic manor. A creature who could hear her heartbeat from 3 floors away. She had been careful, so careful. Every appointment scheduled during his absences. Every symptom hidden behind excuses. Fatigue blamed on sleepless nights. Nausea dismissed as a lingering flu. She had even learned to control her breathing when he was near, to keep her pulse steady, to avoid the questions his sharp, ancient eyes always seemed to ask without speaking. But tonight, she had let her guard down. The email sat open on the screen, glowing like a confession she hadn't meant to write. Her hand moved to close the laptop, but something stopped her, a shift in the air, a coldness that didn't belong to the room. It pressed against her shoulders first, then slid down her spine like fingers made of frost. She froze, working late. His voice came from directly behind her, low and smooth, the kind of voice that could lull you into comfort or strip you bare with a single inflection. She didn't need to turn around to know he was there. She could feel him, the weight of his presence, the way the room seemed to exhale in his direction, the way her own body tensed in response. Her fingers slammed the laptop shut, too fast, too defensive. The sound echoed in the silence like a door being locked after the intruder was already inside. "Just checking messages," she said, her voice tight, carefully neutral. He didn't move, didn't step closer, didn't need to. The air itself seemed to carry him forward, wrapping around her like a living thing. She could hear the faint rustle of his coat, the near-silent brush of his boots against the Persian rug. And then his hand, pale and impossibly still, appeared beside her on the desk, resting there with the casual certainty of someone who had all the time in the world. "Messages," he repeated, the word tasting different in his mouth, like he was testing for lies. At this hour. Elena's throat tightened. She had rehearsed this moment a dozen times in her mind. The calm explanation, the reasonable tone, the way she would tell him without breaking, without fear. But now, with him standing behind her, close enough that she could feel the absence of warmth where his breath should be, every word she had prepared dissolved into panic. "I didn't hear you come in," she said instead, hating how small her voice sounded. "You weren't listening." His other hand came to rest on the back of her chair, not touching her, but caging her in. She could see his reflection now in the darkened window across the room, tall, angular, impossibly still. His eyes, even in the faint reflection, burned with that unnatural amber light, the kind that saw too much, remembered everything. Lord Cashendraven. The name alone carried weight in the world beyond the manor's iron gates, whispered in fear, spoken in reverence, written in old texts as both savior and plague. He had walked through centuries without aging, without softening, without ever once appearing anything less than exactly what he was, a predator wrapped in the silk of civility. And she had fallen in love with him anyway. "You're tense," he observed, his voice threading to the silence like smoke. "Your shoulders, the way you're gripping the edge of the desk. Something is wrong. Nothing's wrong. Liar." The word was soft, almost affectionate, but it landed like a blade. He leaned down, slowly, deliberately, until his face was beside hers, his lips near her ear. She could feel the cold radiating from him, could smell the faint scent of old wood and night air that always clung to him. "I can hear it," he whispered. Your heartbeat. It's different tonight. Her breath caught. She forced herself to exhale slowly, to keep her hand steady. Different how? Faster. Louder. Like you're running. Even though you haven't moved. His hand drifted from the chair to her shoulder, a touch so light it barely registered. Yet it sent a shiver through her entire body. Not from fear, though there was always fear with him, a low hum of it, instinctual and electric, but from something else. Something that made this whole situation unbearable. Because she didn't just fear him, she loved him. And that made the secret she was carrying feel like a betrayal carved into her own chest. "Cashin," she said quietly, testing his name in her mouth, hoping it would soften him. "I'm fine. Just tired." "Tired," he echoed, and she could hear the disbelief threaded through the word. His fingers tightened slightly on her shoulder, not painful, but firm, grounding, possessive. "You've been tired for weeks, Elena. You've been pale, distracted, eating less, sleeping more. And now—" He paused. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. "Now you're closing your laptop the moment I walk in." Her stomach twisted. She forced herself to turn, slowly, meeting his eyes for the first time since he had entered the room. Up close. They were devastating. Amber shot through with gold, ancient and sharp, framed by dark lashes that should have softened his face, but only made him look more dangerous. "I wasn't hiding anything," she said, the lie tasting bitter even as it left her lips. He tilted his head, studying her the way a scholar might study an old text, searching for meaning in every line, every shadow. Then open it again. "What?" "The laptop." His gaze didn't waver. "If there's nothing to hide, show me." Her heart slammed against her ribs. She could feel the heat rising in her cheeks, could feel the panic clawing at the edges of her control. "That's private." "Private." He said the word like it was foreign, like the concept didn't exist in his world. And maybe it didn't. He had lived for centuries, had seen empires rise and fall, had walked through the private lives of mortals like a ghost passing through walls. What was privacy to something like him? "Yes," she said, firmer now, forcing steel into her voice. "Private." For a moment he said nothing, just watched her, his expression unreadable, his stillness absolute. And then, slowly, deliberately, he straightened, stepping back just enough to give her space. But his eyes never left hers. "You've never kept secrets from me before," he said quietly. And for the first time, she heard something beneath the smoothness of his voice. Something raw. Why start now? The question hung in the air between them, heavy and impossible to answer, because the truth was complicated, because the truth would change everything, because the truth involved a life she hadn't planned for, a choice she didn't know how to make, and a man, no, a creature, who had never once spoken of futures, of families, of anything beyond the cold, eternal present he had lived in for so long. "Cashin," she started, but the words caught in her throat. He waited, patient, inevitable, and in that moment, she realized that no matter how much time she bought, no matter how carefully she crafted the truth, this conversation was always going to end the same way, with him knowing, with everything changing, with the question she had been asking herself for weeks finally spoken aloud by someone else. "What are you hiding?" She opened her mouth to answer, but before she could speak, his gaze shifted, just slightly, just enough, to the closed laptop on the desk. And she saw it then, in the way his eyes narrowed, in the way his jaw tightened, in the way his entire body went still in that predatory, inhuman way that reminded her exactly what he was. He had already seen it. The reflection on the screen before she closed it. The words glowing in the dark. Prenatal visit number 2. And now, there was no hiding anymore. The silence that followed was absolute. Not the comfortable silence they had shared during long evenings by the fire, or the contemplative quiet of early mornings when he would read and she would sketch. This was the silence of a world holding its breath, waiting for the earthquake to begin. Cashin's hand, still resting on the desk, curled slowly into a fist. Not in anger, not yet, but in something that looked almost like restraint. Like he was physically holding himself back from something she couldn't name. "Prenatal," he said finally, the word unfamiliar in his mouth, clinical and strange. Second visit. Elena felt the air leave her lungs. There it was, the truth, laid bare between them like a body on an altar. Cashin, how long? His voice was different now. Lower, colder. The kind of cold that had nothing to do with his nature and everything to do with the space opening up between them. How long have you known? She stood, the chair scraping against the floor, needing distance, needing air, needing anything that didn't feel like drowning. But he moved with her, not following, just there, suddenly, blocking her path with nothing but his presence. 6 weeks, she whispered. I found out 6 weeks ago. His jaw clenched. She watched the muscle jump beneath his pale skin, watched the way his hands flexed at his sides, watched the way his eyes burned brighter, hotter, like embers caught in a draft. 6 weeks. He repeated it like he was trying to make sense of a foreign language. And you said nothing. I didn't know how. You know how? His voice rose just slightly, just enough to make her flinch. You've lived in my home for a year, Elena. Share my bed, my life, and you didn't know how to tell me you're carrying a child. The word hung between them, child, and she saw something flicker across his face. Something she couldn't read. Something that looked almost like pain. I was scared, she said, the admission breaking free before she could stop it. I didn't know what you would say. What you would do. He stepped closer, and she forced herself not to retreat. What do you think I would do? I don't know. The words came out sharper than she intended, laced with weeks of fear and sleepless nights and questions she had no answers to. You've never spoken about children, Cashin. Never mentioned the possibility. You're immortal. You've lived for centuries without. Without what? His eyes locked onto hers, and she saw something dangerous swimming in their depths. Without wanting, without feeling, without the capacity to. He stopped himself, jaw clenched so tight she thought it might crack. Is it mine? The question hit her like a physical blow. For a moment, she couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process the hurt and fury rising in her chest. How dare you? She breathed. Answer me. Of course it's yours. Her voice cracked, and she hated herself for it, hated the tears burning at the corners of her eyes. Who else would it be? I haven't been with anyone else. I haven't even left this manor except with you. How could you even? Because I didn't think it was possible. The words came out raw, stripped of all the careful control he usually wore like armor. I didn't think I could. Not anymore. Not after all this time. Elena stared at him, the anger draining as quickly as it had come, replaced by something else. Understanding. Confusion. A terrible, aching clarity. You thought you couldn't. I'm dead, Elena. He said it simply, factually, like he was explaining the weather. My heart doesn't beat. My blood doesn't flow. I haven't been alive in the way you understand life for over 300 years. So, yes, forgive me for questioning the impossible. She took a shaky breath, processing his words, the weight of them. But it happened, apparently. And you know it could? His silence was answer enough. The rain outside had intensified, drumming against the windows with increased urgency. Lightning flashed, briefly illuminating the room in stark white. And in that moment, she saw him clearly. Not the Lord, not the predator, not the immortal creature of legend. Just a man, standing in the ruins of everything he thought he knew about himself. I need to sit, she said quietly. He moved aside instantly, and she sank back into the chair, hands shaking, mind racing. She had prepared for anger, for rejection, for 100 different versions of this conversation. But she hadn't prepared for this, for the revelation that he was as shocked as she was, as lost in this impossible reality. How is this possible? She asked, looking up at him. If you thought you couldn't, how? Cashin moved to the window, staring out at the storm-darkened grounds. His reflection in the glass looked like a painting, all sharp lines and shadows, beautiful and terrible at once. I don't know, he admitted. In all my years, I've never heard of such a thing. Vampires don't. We don't create life. Elena, we take it, preserve it in ourselves, in those we turn. But to conceive, to generate something new. He shook his head slowly. It shouldn't be possible. But it is. Apparently, he said again, and she heard the edge of something in his voice. Wonder, maybe, or fear. What does this mean? She asked, her hand unconsciously moving to her stomach. Still flat, still unchanged. What happens now? He turned to face her, and in his eyes, she saw centuries of knowledge, of experience, of dark wisdom, and none of it seemed to help him answer her question. I don't know, he said. And for the first time since she had known him, Lord Cassian Draven looked truly, utterly uncertain. The storm raged through the night, but inside the manor a different kind of tempest brewed. Silent, suffocating, made of questions that had no answers and fears that had no names. Elena hadn't slept. She had tried. Retreating to their bedroom hours after their conversation in the library had dissolved into heavy silence. But sleep felt impossible when every cell in her body was alive with anxiety, with uncertainty, with the terrible knowledge that everything had changed and nothing could ever go back. She lay in the massive four-poster bed, staring at the canopy above, listening to the rain in the absence of breathing beside her. Cassian hadn't come to bed. She didn't know where he had gone. The manor was vast, full of rooms she had never entered, passages she had never explored. He could be anywhere, doing anything, thinking thoughts she couldn't begin to imagine. Her hand rested on her stomach again, a gesture that was becoming a habit. There was nothing to feel yet, no movement, no change. Just the knowledge, medical and certain, that something was growing inside her. Something that shouldn't exist. Something impossible. A vampire's child. The phrase sounded like something from a Gothic novel, melodramatic and unreal. But it was real. The pregnancy test had been real. The doctor's confirmation had been real. The tiny cluster of cells dividing and multiplying inside her was real, whether Cassian believed it possible or not. The question that haunted her wasn't whether it was real. It was whether it was safe. She had asked Dr. Castellan that question during her first visit, voice shaking, trying to explain without explaining. The father, he has a rare genetic condition, blood-related. I don't know if it could affect. The doctor had been kind, professional, reassuring. We'll monitor everything closely. Every pregnancy is unique, and we'll adapt to whatever comes. Right now, everything looks healthy and normal. But Dr. Castellan didn't know what normal meant when one parent had been dead for 3 centuries. A sound from the doorway made her turn. Cassian stood there, framed by the faint light from the hallway, still wearing the same clothes from earlier. He looked tired, not in the way humans look tired, but in some deeper way, like the weight of centuries had suddenly remembered to press down on him all at once. You're awake, he said quietly. So are you. I don't sleep. You rest, though. You always rest beside me. He didn't respond to that, just stepped into the room, closing the door behind him with a soft click. The darkness wrapped around them, broken only by the occasional flash of lightning through the heavy curtains. I've been in the archives, he said finally, moving to sit in the leather chair by the window. Not on the bed, not close to her. Reading everything I could find about vampire bloodlines, reproduction, the old legends. Elena sat up, pulling the blanket around herself. And nothing. Frustration bled through his voice. There's stories, myths, whispers of dampiers, children born of vampire and human unions. But they're always presented as legends, cautionary tales, things that didn't actually happen. Or if they did, it was in the early days before the curse fully took hold, when we were still closer to human. But you're not, she said softly. Close to human, I mean. His eyes found hers in the darkness. No, I'm not. The admission sat between them, heavy and undeniable. She had always known what he was. Of course. Had seen him feed, had watched him move with that inhuman grace, had felt the coldness of his skin against hers. But loving him had made it easy to forget, to pretend, to focus on the parts of him that felt human. His intelligence, his humor, the way he would hold her at night as if she were something precious. Now, pretending felt impossible. What are you thinking? She asked. He was quiet for a long moment, his gaze distant. I'm thinking about what this child might be, what it might inherit from me. The fear in his voice was new. She had heard him angry, passionate, even melancholic, but never afraid, never uncertain in this particular, deeply personal way. What do you mean? My nature, Elena. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped tightly. The hunger, the darkness, the need for blood. What if... He stopped, jaw clenching. What if this child is born like me? The question hung in the air, terrible and real. She hadn't let herself think about it, not fully, had pushed it down every time it tried to surface. But now, hearing him voice it, she couldn't ignore it anymore. We don't know that, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. It might be human, completely human, or it might not be. His eyes met hers, and in them, she saw centuries of self-knowledge, of understanding exactly what he was. Do you know what I am, truly? Not the romantic version you've let yourself believe. The reality. Cashin, I'm a predator. Elena, I've killed more people than you've met in your entire life. I've ended bloodlines, destroyed families, left corpses in my wake for centuries. And I did it without remorse, because that's what we do. That's what the curse makes us. His voice was hard, brutal in its honesty. I've spent the last 100 years trying to be better, trying to control it, to live with some semblance of morality. But it's always there, lurking beneath the surface. The hunger, the instinct, the part of me that sees humans as prey. She wanted to argue to defend him, but the words died in her throat. Because he was right. She had romanticized him, had fallen in love with the gentleman, the scholar, the protector, but he was also the hunter, the killer, the creature who had survived centuries by taking life. I see you as more than that, she said quietly, because I've chosen to be more. But choice requires consciousness, control, the ability to reason. What if this child doesn't have that? What if it's born with my hunger, but without the centuries of experience to control it? What if... His voice broke, just slightly, just enough. What if I've cursed you with something monstrous? Elena's throat tightened. She slipped out of bed, crossing the room to kneel in front of his chair. He tried to turn away, but she caught his face in her hands, forcing him to look at her. You're not a monster, she said firmly. Elena, you're not. Her voice was stronger now, certain in a way that surprised even her. A monster wouldn't be afraid of hurting me. Wouldn't care about what this child might be. Wouldn't spend hours in an archive looking for answers to keep us safe. You're not a monster, Cashin. You're just afraid. His jaw clenched beneath her palms. Of course I'm afraid. I'm terrified. Because I love you, and I don't know how to protect you from what I might have done. The confession hit her like a wave. He had never said it before, not like this, not with such raw, desperate honesty. They had danced around the word, implied it in actions and gestures, but never spoken aloud. I love you too, she whispered. And I'm afraid too, but we're in this together now. Whatever this child is, whatever happens, we face it together. He pulled her hands away gently, standing and moving back to the window, putting distance between them again. You don't understand what you're asking. Then help me understand. If this child is like me, he pressed his palm against the cold glass. If it has my nature, my needs, it will require blood. Elena, from the moment it's born, possibly even before. And if it doesn't get it, if we can't find a way to satisfy that hunger. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Elena felt ice creep through her veins. She had been so focused on the impossibility of the pregnancy itself that she hadn't thought beyond it, hadn't considered the practical, horrifying reality of what feeding such a child might mean. There has to be a way, she said, but even to her own ears, it sounded hollow. Maybe. He turned back to her, and in his eyes, she saw the weight of every dark possibility he had been imagining. Or maybe there isn't. Maybe the reason this doesn't happen is because nature itself prevents it, because the cost is too high. Are you saying... She couldn't finish the question. Couldn't make herself ask if he was suggesting what she thought he was suggesting. I'm saying we need to know what we're dealing with. We need answers, real ones, before we make any decisions. He moved toward her, slowly, like approaching something fragile. There are others, older than me, ancient creatures who might remember, who might know something I don't. You want to ask them? I have to. His hand reached out, hesitating before touching her cheek. Because I won't let you go through this blind. I won't let you carry something that might destroy you from the inside. The touch was gentle, almost reverent, but beneath it, she felt his fear, his love, his terrible, desperate need to protect her from something he didn't understand. When? She asked. Tomorrow night. There's a gathering in the old city, beneath the cathedral. Elders meet there once a century to exchange knowledge, settle disputes. I wasn't planning to attend, but... He exhaled slowly. This changes things. Elena nodded, trying to process everything, trying to be brave when all she wanted to do was curl up and pretend none of this was happening. What if they don't know either? Then we figure out ourselves. His thumb traced her cheekbone, the touch cold but tender. Whatever it takes, Elena, whatever we have to do, I won't lose you. She leaned into his touch, closing her eyes, letting herself have this moment of comfort before the fear rushed back in. Promise me something. Anything. Don't make me give up on this child without trying. Don't ask me to end this before we know what it is. His hand stilled, the silence stretched, heavy with implications, with the unspoken question hanging between them. Finally he spoke, his voice rough. I promise. But Elena... What? If it comes down to choosing between you and the child... His eyes held hers, burning with intensity. I will choose you, every time, without hesitation. The word should have been romantic, protective, loving, but they felt like a knife, sharp and cold, cutting through her hope, because she knew he meant it. And she didn't know if she could make the same choice. The old cathedral loomed against the night sky, like a monument to forgotten prayers. Its spires reached toward heaven, but its roots, Elena knew now, delved deep into something else entirely. Something older, something that predated the crosses and the stained glass and the hymns that had once filled its halls. She stood beside Cash in the shadow of its western wall, wrapped in a dark cloak he had given her, feeling the cold October wind bite through the fabric. Around them, the city slept, oblivious to what moved beneath its streets, what gathered in the spaces between its history and its present. Are you certain you want to come? Cashin asked for the third time since they had left the manor. Yes. It won't be pleasant. The elders don't care for humans in their presence. They'll see you as prey or worse, as an insult. Then they'll have to adjust their expectations. She kept her voice steady, even though fear coiled in her stomach like a living thing. This is about me as much as it's about you. I'm not waiting at home while you decide my future. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Stubborn. You knew that when you met me. I did. He took her hand, his cold fingers wrapping around hers. Stay close to me. Don't speak unless spoken to. And if I tell you to run, I won't. Elena, I won't leave you. Whatever happens down there, we face it together. That was the promise, remember? He looked at her for a long moment, something complicated moving through his expression. Then he nodded once and led her toward a small iron door set into the cathedral's foundation. The door opened at his touch, revealing a stone staircase spiraling down into darkness. No light reached from above. No sound except their footsteps, hers echoing softly, his absolutely silent. As they descended, the air grew colder, denser, carrying a scent she couldn't identify. Not decay exactly. Something older, like earth and stone and time itself. The cathedral was built over these tunnels, Cashin explained quietly, his voice echoing strangely in confined space. But the tunnels came first. They've been here for thousands of years. Some say they were used by the first vampires, the original ones, before the bloodline split and the curse evolved. Who were they? The first ones. No one knows. The story's conflict. Some say we were a punishment from God, others that we were the result of ancient magic gone wrong. A few believe we're simply evolution's mistake, a predator that learned to think, to reason, to pretend. The staircase ended in a narrow tunnel carved from solid rock. Torches lined the walls at intervals, their flames burning without smoke, casting dancing shadows that made the walls seem alive. Elena's heart hammered in her chest. Every instinct screamed at her to turn back, to run, to get away from this place that felt so fundamentally wrong. But she forced herself forward, hand tight in Cashin's, focusing on the warmth of her own pulse as an anchor to reality. They walked for what felt like miles, though she knew it couldn't have been more than a few hundred yards. The tunnel twisted and turned, opening occasionally into small chambers carved with symbols she didn't recognize. Finally, they reached a massive archway, beyond which lay a space that stole her breath. It was a cathedral within a cathedral, a vast underground chamber with soaring ceilings held up by columns of natural stone. But where the structure above was filled with light and hope and holy imagery, this place was all shadow and silence and ancient power, and it was filled with vampires. They stood in clusters throughout the space, dozens of them, maybe more. Some looked almost human, pale but ordinary, dressed in modern clothes. Others were clearly ancient, their features sharp and alien, their eyes glowed with colors that didn't exist in nature. They turned as Cashin and Elena entered, conversation dying, attention focusing with predatory precision. Elena felt the weight of their gazes like physical things. She forced herself not to flinch, not to show fear, even as her pulse raced and her hands trembled. "Lord Draven," a voice echoed from the far end of the chamber. "How unexpected. I thought you had sworn off our gatherings." A figure emerged from the shadows, tall, impossibly thin, with skin like alabaster and eyes like chips of ice. They wore robes that might have been black or might have been the color of void itself, moving around them like liquid shadow. Elder Constantine. Cashin bowed his head slightly, a gesture of respect that clearly cost him something. Circumstances have changed. Indeed. Constantine's gaze slid to Elena, and she felt something cold wrap around her heart. "You bring prey to our sanctum." "How novel." "She is under my protection." Cashin's voice hardened. "And she is here because we seek knowledge." "Knowledge." Constantine moved closer, circling them slowly. Elena could see other vampires drifting nearer, drawn by curiosity or hunger or some combination of both. What knowledge could possibly require bringing a human into our midst? Cashin hesitated, and Elena knew why. What they were about to reveal could put them both in danger, could open them up to scrutiny or attack or worse. But there was no other way. They needed answers. "She carries my child," Cashin said simply. The silence that followed was absolute. Every vampire in the chamber went still, their attention sharpening to a razor's edge. Elena heard someone hiss, heard a low growl from somewhere in the darkness. The temperature seemed to drop another 10 degrees. Constantine stopped circling, standing directly in front of them now. Impossible. We thought so too, but the evidence is undeniable. She is pregnant, and I am the father. Show me. It wasn't a request. Elena's hand instinctively went to her stomach, protective, defensive. Cashin stepped slightly in front of her. "You'll take our word or we leave. You come to us seeking knowledge, yet you refuse to provide proof?" Constantine's voice was dangerously soft. "That's not how this works, Draven. I won't have her examined like livestock. Then you won't get your answers." The standoff stretched, tense and crackling with potential violence. Elena could feel Cashin's body coiling, ready to fight or flee. Could see the other vampires tensing, waiting. "I'll do it," she said quietly. "Elena!" "I'll do it," she repeated, louder now, stepping forward. "If it gets us answers, I'll do whatever you need." Constantine's cold eyes fixed on her, and she forced herself not to look away. After a moment, something like approval flickered in their depths. Brave, or foolish. Sometimes the difference is meaningless. They gestured to a stone platform in the center of the chamber. "Lie there. I will examine you." Elena moved toward the platform, acutely aware of every eye following her. She climbed onto the cold stone, lying back, staring up at the distant ceiling. Cashin stood beside her, his hand finding hers, squeezing once. Constantine approached, their movements fluid and strange, like they were gliding rather than walking. They placed one impossibly cold hand on Elena's stomach, over her clothes, and closed their eyes. The sensation was immediate and overwhelming. Elena gasped as something pushed into her, not physical but not entirely mental either. It felt like ice water spreading through her veins, like invisible fingers searching, probing, analyzing. She wanted to push it away, to fight it, but Cashin's hand in hers kept her grounded. After what felt like an eternity, Constantine's eyes snapped open. They stared down at Elena with an expression she couldn't read, then slowly turned to Cashin. "It's true," they said, and their voice carried through the chamber like a pronouncement of fate. "She carries life. Hybrid life. Half human, half—" They trailed off, and for the first time, Elena saw something like uncertainty in their ancient face. "What?" Cashin demanded. "Half what?" "I don't know." Constantine removed their hand, stepping back. "I've never felt anything like this. It's alive, yes. Growing, yes. But its nature is—" They shook their heads slowly. "Undefined, unstable, like it hasn't decided what it wants to be yet." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Vampires moved closer, their interest no longer just curious but intensely focused. Elena sat up, instinctively protective, wrapping her arms around herself. "What does that mean?" she asked. "Unstable? It means the child is in flux." Another vampire stepped forward, this one shorter, stockier, with eyes like burning coals. Neither fully human nor fully vampire. It's adapting, changing, trying to find equilibrium between two natures that were never meant to combine. "Is it dangerous?" Cashin's voice was tight. To her, the stocky vampire looked at Elena with something that might have been pity. "We don't know. There's no precedent." But what?" "The transformation of a human to vampire requires death and rebirth. The body must die before it can be remade. If this child is trying to become vampire while still gestating in a living womb—" They didn't finish the sentence, but the implication was clear enough. Elena felt cold seep into her bones. "You're saying it might kill me." "We're saying we don't know what it might do." Constantine raised a hand, silencing the murmurs. "There's one who might know more. One who remembers the oldest days, before the bloodlines were established, before the curse took its final form." "Who?" Cashin asked. "The Oracle of Shadows. She lives in the mountains north of here, in a monastery that predates even this cathedral. If anyone has knowledge of hybrid births, it would be her." "The Oracle is a myth," Cashin said flatly. "So was this until today." Constantine gestured at Elena. "The world is full of myths that turn out to be truth. Draven, you of all creatures should know that." Cashin was quiet for a long moment, thinking, calculating. Elena could see the conflict in his eyes, the desire to find answers warring with the knowledge that every step deeper into this world brought more danger. "How we find her?" he asked finally. "I can provide directions. But understand this, Draven, the Oracle deals in prices. She will answer your questions, but the cost may be more than you're willing to pay." "We'll pay it." "Don't be so quick to promise." Constantine's eyes burned cold. "Not until you know what she'll ask for." Elena felt Cashin's hand tighten around hers. She looked up at him, saw the determination in his face, the protective fury burning beneath his controlled exterior. "We'll pay it," he repeated. "Whatever it is." Constantine studied them both for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Very well. But know this, once you seek the Oracle, there is no turning back. She will see everything you are, everything you've been, everything you fear, and she will use that knowledge however she sees fit." "We understand," Elena said, surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice. "Do you?" Constantine's gaze pinned her. "Do you understand that seeking answers might mean learning truths you wish you never knew? That the price for knowledge is often innocence, and once paid can never be reclaimed?" Elena thought of the life growing inside her, of the impossible situation they were in, of the love she felt for the ancient creature standing beside her. "Yes," she said, "I understand." "Then go." Constantine turned away, dismissing them with a wave. Seek your oracle, discover your truths, and pray that the cost doesn't destroy you both. As they left the underground chamber, climbing back toward the surface, Elena felt the weight of dozens of eyes following them. She didn't look back, didn't let herself think about what she had just agreed to, because deep down, she knew Constantine was right. Some truths changed everything, and there was no going back from change. The monastery clung to mountainside like a secret the world had tried to forget. Its stones were ancient, weathered by centuries of wind and snow, covered in moss that glowed faintly in the moonlight with an otherworldly phosphorescence. No paths led to it, no roads. They had climbed for 2 nights through terrain that should have been impassable, guided only by Constantine's cryptic directions and Cassian's preternatural sense of direction. Elena was exhausted. Every muscle ached. Her lungs burned from the thin air, and she was certain she had lost sensation in her toes hours ago. But she kept moving, kept climbing, because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant confronting the full terror of what they were doing. There, Cassian pointed to a narrow bridge of stone spanning a chasm that seemed to fall forever into darkness. That's the crossing. Elena looked at the bridge, then at the drop, then back at Cassian. You're joking. I wish I was. The bridge was barely wide enough for one person, with no railings, no safety, nothing but empty air on either side. Snow had accumulated on its surface, making it slick and treacherous. One wrong step, one moment of lost balance, and she would fall into darkness. I can carry you, Cassian offered. No. She took a breath, steadying herself. I can do this. Elena, I can do this, she repeated more firmly. She had come too far, risked too much, to let fear stop her now. She stepped onto the bridge. The stone was solid beneath her feet, but that did nothing to ease the terror singing in her veins. She focused on breathing, on moving forward one step at a time, on not looking down. Halfway across, the wind picked up, howling to the chasm like a living thing. Elena froze, hands outstretched for balance, heart hammering. She felt Cassian behind her, close but not touching, ready to catch her if she fell. Keep moving, he said softly. You're almost there. She forced her feet forward. One step, another. The wind pulled at her cloak, threatened to unbalance her. She ignored it, focused only on the far side, on solid ground, on safety. When her foot finally touched earth beyond the bridge, she nearly collapsed with relief. Cassian was beside her in an instant, steadying her, holding her until the shaking stopped. You did it, he murmured against her hair. I know. She pulled back, looking up at him. Don't ever ask me to do it again. A hint of a smile touched his lips. Agreed. The monastery's entrance was a simple wooden door, ancient and weathered. It stood slightly ajar, as if expecting them. Cassian pushed it open slowly, revealing a narrow corridor lit by the same phosphorescent moss that covered the exterior. They entered in silence, moving through passages that twisted and turned like the interior of a shell. The air inside was warmer than outside, but still carried that strange, cold quality that seemed to define all ancient places. Elena could hear water dripping somewhere, could smell and sense an old stone and something else, something organic and alive that she couldn't identify. The corridor opened into a circular chamber. In its center sat a woman. She was ancient, not in the way vampires were ancient, preserved in one moment forever, but truly deeply old. Her face was a map of wrinkles, her hair white as snow, her body bent with the weight of years beyond counting. But her eyes burned with intelligence, with knowledge, with a light that seemed to come from some internal fire. Lord Draven. Her voice was surprisingly strong, clear. How long has it been? 2 centuries? 3. Cassian bowed deeply, respectfully. Oracle, I apologize for disturbing your meditation. Do you? She smiled, and it transformed her face, made her look almost young again. You wouldn't be here if you weren't desperate. And desperate men rarely apologize with sincerity. Her gaze shifted to Elena. And you? The one carrying the impossible. Elena felt exposed, like the oracle could see right through her, see the life growing inside, see every fear and hope and doubt she carried. Yes. Come closer, child. Let me see you properly. Elena approached, legs unsteady, until she stood directly before the oracle. The old woman reached out, placing both hands on Elena's stomach with surprising gentleness. "Oh," she breathed, her eyes widening. "Oh, this is remarkable. What is it?" Elena asked, her voice barely a whisper. "What do you feel?" "Two heartbeats. Yours, strong and steady. And another, smaller, faster, struggling to establish its rhythm." The oracle's hands moved in slow circles, feeling, sensing. It's fighting itself, this child, fighting to reconcile what it is. "Can you help us?" Cashin stepped forward. "Can you tell us what will happen? If Elena is in danger..." The oracle was quiet for a long moment, her eyes distant, seeing something beyond the physical. When she spoke again, her voice had changed, taken on a quality that seemed to echo from multiple places at once. "The child is both curse and miracle. It exists in the space between life and death. Try to inhabit both simultaneously. If it succeeds, if it finds balance, it will be something new, something that has never existed before. And if it fails?" Elena asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted the answer. "If it fails, the imbalance will destroy it. And likely you as well." The words hung in the air, cold and final. Elena felt Cashin move closer, his presence at her back both comfort and reminder of what was at stake. "How do we help it succeed?" she asked. "There has to be something we can do." The oracle removed her hands, settling back in her seated position. "There is, but the price is steep." "What price?" Cashin demanded. "The child needs a tether. Something to anchor it to both worlds, life and death, human and vampire. It needs a connection to mortality and to immortality, sustained and constant, from now until birth." "I don't understand," Elena said. "Blood." The oracle explained simply. "Your blood, human and alive, given willingly. And his blood, vampire and dead, given with love. The child must drink from both, must be nourished by both, must learn to balance both natures through sustained exposure." Elena felt her stomach turn. "You're saying that we need to... You must feed the child your blood directly. And Lord Draven must do the same. Not once, but continuously throughout the pregnancy. The child will drink from you internally, will take what it needs from your shared circulation, but will also need his blood, introduced directly into your system, merging with yours, feeding the child's vampire nature." "That could kill her," Cashin said immediately. "Vampire blood is toxic to humans. It burns, destroys, transforms. I can't. In normal circumstances, yes. But this child is already changing her, has already begun altering her physiology to accommodate its existence. Her body will adapt, will learn to process what would normally destroy it, but only if the exposure is careful, controlled, gradual." "You're asking me to poison her slowly," Cashin said, his voice raw. "To feed her my blood little by little, until her body either adapts or breaks. I'm asking you to save your child." The oracle's gaze was unflinching. "And possibly create something that could bridge the divide between your species. A being capable of walking in both worlds, understanding both natures, the first of its kind." Elena looked at Cashin, saw the war raging in his eyes, saw his desire to protect her battling with his need to save the child, saw his fear of losing her warring with his hope that this might actually work. "There's more, isn't there?" she asked the oracle quietly. "There's always more." The old woman nodded slowly. "The blood exchange will create a bond between you and Lord Draven, stronger than what you have now. His blood in your veins will tie you to him in ways that cannot be undone. You will feel what he feels, know what he knows, and he will have the same access to you." "Like a turning?" Cashin asked sharply. "No, not transformation, but connection, deep, permanent, absolute. Your souls will be intertwined." Elena felt the weight of that revelation, a permanent bond, not just with pregnancy, but forever. Her humanity tied to his darkness, his immortality linked to her mortality. It was terrifying. It was impossible. It was also the only way. How we do it? She asked. Elena, no, Cashin started. How? She repeated, looking at the oracle, not at him. What do we need to do? The oracle stood slowly, moving to a small altar in the corner of the chamber. She returned with a silver chalice, ancient and inscribed with symbols that seemed to ride in the phosphorescent light. Tonight, before the moon sets, you drink his blood from this cup. Not much, just enough to begin the process. Then each night after, a small amount, gradually increasing as the child grows and its needs intensify. She handed the chalice to Cashin, who took it like it was made of poison, which Elena supposed it essentially was. If this goes wrong, he started, then we deal with it. Elena interrupted. Together, like we promised. He looked at her, really looked at her, and she saw everything in his eyes. The fear, the love, the desperate, aching need to keep her safe warm with the knowledge that safety might no longer be possible. Are you certain? He asked softly. No. She took his free hand, lacing their fingers together. But I'm certain that I love you. And I'm certain that this child deserves a chance. And I'm certain that I'd rather die trying than spend the rest of my life wondering what might have been. Something broke in his expression. He pulled her close, pressing his forehead to hers, holding her like she was the only solid thing in a world gone liquid and strange. I love you, he whispered. More than I knew I could love anything. More than I thought possible after all these centuries. And if this destroys you, I will never forgive myself. Then don't let it destroy me. She pulled back, looked him in the eyes. Help me survive this. Help our child survive this. And whatever comes after, we'll face it together. He nodded slowly, then raised his wrist to his mouth. His fangs extended, sharp and terrible, and he bit down without hesitation. Blood welled, dark and viscous, not quite the color of human blood. He held his wrist over the chalice, letting it drip, filling the cup halfway before pulling away. The wound healed almost instantly, leaving no mark. He held the chalice out to her. Elena took it with shaking hands. The blood inside was warm, warmer than she expected, and it seemed to pulse with its own internal rhythm. She could smell it, copper and earth and something indefinable, something that called to something deep in her hindbrain, something primitive and afraid. Slowly, the oracle advised, small sips, let your body adjust between each one. Elena raised the cup to her lips. The blood touched her tongue, and she almost dropped it. It burned, not painfully but intensely, like liquid fire spreading through her mouth, down her throat. She forced herself to swallow, felt it settle her stomach like a living coal. Her vision blurred. The room spun. She felt Cashin's hands on her arms, steadying her, heard his voice from far away saying her name. The burning intensified, spreading through her chest, her limbs, her head. It felt like being unmade and remade simultaneously, like her body was trying to decide if this was poison or sustenance. And then, suddenly it passed. The burning faded to warmth. The spinning stopped. Elena blinked, and the world came back into focus. She was on her knees, didn't remember falling, with Cashin kneeling beside her, his face pale with fear. Elena, can you hear me? I'm okay, she managed. It's okay. Your heartbeat, he said, wonder creeping into his voice. It's stronger, steadier, and I can feel... He pressed his hand to his chest, over his silent heart. I can feel you, inside me, your presence. She felt it too, now that he mentioned it. A new awareness, like a thread connecting them. She could sense his fear, his relief, his love, could feel the cold weight of centuries pressing on him, the hunger always lurking beneath his control, but also his strength, his determination, his absolute commitment to protecting her. The bond has begun, the oracle said quietly. It will strengthen over time. By the end of the pregnancy, you will be as close to one being as two separate entities can be. Elena looked at Cashin, saw her own wonder reflected in his eyes. This was it, the point of no return. They were bound now, tied together in ways that transcended the physical, the rational, the explicable. What happens now? She asked. Now you go home, the oracle said. You rest. You continue the blood exchange nightly. You monitor the child development, and you pray that the balance holds. And if it doesn't, the oracle's expression softened, became almost gentle. Then you will face whatever comes with the same courage you've shown tonight. But know this, child, the very fact that you survived the first dose suggests your body is already adapting. The child inside you is stronger than any of us anticipated. It wants to live. It's fighting to exist. That gives you better odds than most would have in your situation. Elena nodded, taking what comfort she could from those words. Cashin helped her stand, keeping a supportive arm around her waist. She felt different, changed already, though she couldn't quite articulate how. "Thank you," Cashin said to the oracle, bowing again. "We are in your debt." "Yes," the old woman agreed. "You are, but that is a debt for another day. For now, go, bring this impossible child into the world. And if you succeed—" She smiled, mysterious and ancient. "Well, the world could use something new." They left the monastery as dawn approached, crossing back over the terrifying bridge, making their way down the mountain through paths that seemed less treacherous than they had on the way up. Maybe it was the approaching light. Maybe it was relief at having answers, however frightening. Or maybe it was the bond between them, making her feel less alone, less afraid, less like she was carrying this burden by herself. As they reached the base of the mountain, Elena paused, looking back at the monastery barely visible in the distance. She pressed her hand to her stomach, feeling the warmth there, the life, the impossible possibility growing inside her. "We're going to make it," she said, not quite a question, not quite a statement. Cashin took her hand, lacing their fingers together. Through the bond, she felt his determination, his fear, his love, all swirling together into something that felt like hope. "We're going to try," he said, "and that's all anyone can do." Together, they walked toward the rising sun, toward home, toward whatever future awaited them. The path ahead was uncertain, dangerous, filled with unknowns, but they would face it as they had faced everything else. Together, bound by love, by blood, by an impossible child that refused to be anything less than a miracle. And in the end, that would have to be enough.